morning, or evening, or whatever the case may be. I was reading in the Book of Concord, the Apology to the Augsburg Confession, the differences between the Quarto edition and the Octavo edition. And what I learned is that the word apology, as in making a defense for something, comes from the Greek word apologesthai. And it was coined by the author to Apology to the Augsburg Confession, Philip Melanchthon, in regards to the apology, which makes Lutherans the creators of apologetics. We coined the term. Among my other reading this morning, I did get a look at Touchstone Magazine, the New Atheists, Christopher Hitchens, and in his book, God is Not Great, how he deals with mammals. How he likes to go after his opponents or the purporters of religious sensibilities, and how he thinks that by just referring to them as mammals, he can somehow insult them. And Philip Johnson, professor of law at California, Berkeley, points out mammals. And there's this strange contradiction, the idea that evolution created what we are. Why should we take seriously any speculation by a mere mammal, or even the consensus of all mammal opinion, whether about the origin of its species or otherwise, no matter how much evidence these mammals have gathered? This is a real flaw in evolutionary theory. If everything that I think happens simply by chance, then how on earth can I possibly be so arrogant as to say that what I have thought could actually be reasonable and make sense? It's the very opposite of reason. If a bunch of worms get together and decide together that they should pursue this or that for wormkind, what makes them right? Once you remove God out of the equation, you can scoff at the mammals who are trying to find God, but at the same time, you're just a mammal trying not to find God. There is no value in anything anymore. Anyway, worship wars! In the very next article by Ken Myers, who is the host and producer of Mars Hill Audio, Apologetics podcast CD series, Apologetics. Lutherans, we coined the term. The rate of cultural change has increased significantly with each passing generation for at least a century and a half. A lot's changed since 1850. He says this has put pressure on church leaders to neglect the hard work of cultural discernment. So because things are changing so fast, there's a lot of pressure on church leaders not to think about it, just to kind of go with it. Follow trends, swim with the tide, let the culture lead us by the nose. If clergy once capitulated to the pressure to endorse the status quo of the age tradition, today they are under at least as much pressure to accommodate the status quo of being fashionable. If your idea of the pastor is that he's the guy who's all stuck in the mud and never really changes anything and has no good reason for making things be the way they always were, that's not what pastors are anymore, generally speaking. That's not the pressure that they face. It's the opposite of that. The pressure that is put upon pastors, both from people and from above, is to make it fit with the status quo of fashion and trend. Modern clergy welcome novelty and jealously guard this new tradition. There is little incentive, then, for taking time to explore the significance of the actual cultural changes. That is, what do they mean for church, for world, for people, for man, for woman? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, we don't have time for that. We're too busy trying to be popular so that we can have our fiscal needs met. And guarding that tradition of remaining popular is so central to the life of the standard clergy that if you challenge it, he will go after, especially if you're a brother clergy. Out of all of this, then, he also notes the one major cultural assumption that we have not discerned, that we have not thought about. The idea that cultural forms are inherently meaningless, that their meaning is something we impose on them. I know you've heard this before. Style, not substance. The form, the style, has no meaning. There's no such thing as meaning in the style. It's just opinion. It's the substance that we take and we put into it. We're going to baptize it Lutheran because the external has no substance in and of itself. This axiom is one of the sacred fundamentals of the postmodern spirit. Postmodernism, the idea of all things are relative. So the idea that the style, the external form, has no actual meaning, this is a sacred fundamental of postmodern philosophy. This is the very essence of what it's built upon. He also goes on to point out that this is not really out of postmodernism, but comes out of modernism. That is, the modern assertion of the sovereignty of the individual and of a cosmology and understanding of the world indicates that sovereignty. That is, the belief that the universe is just a lot of meaningless stuff. Pure materialism. All this, it has no meaning. It's just there. Any meaning that exists comes from where? What's the king of modernism? Individual part. And so I take my meaning, I put it into things, and that's the only true meaning that there is. Compare this to the pre-modern view that the entire universe was conceived as a gift, endowed with a meaning that it is then man's task to discover and then to express. Proverbs says it is God's glory to hide a thing, it is the glory of kings to search it out. It was in the context of this confidence that there is discernible cosmic meaning in stuff that the Western musical tradition actually took shape and was formed. If you don't believe me, go listen to some authentic, classic Korean music. Not the stuff they're doing right now since they've been westernized. Go back before. Compare that to Bach. Central to the study of this entire question, then, is the question of, is there such a thing as aesthetic value? Is there such a thing as beauty? Does it even exist? Or is it only in the eye of the beholder? We have a dominant democratic belief in the equal validity of everything, every opinion, every product. But to an earlier age, our contemporary idea of complete relativism in musical judgment would have seemed nonsensical. But the effects of recording and playback technologies on our emotional expectations, shaping our assumptions about music, combined with modernism and postmodernism in the era we live in, the spirit of the age, have brought us to a point where we are actually going to church and saying how we do church doesn't actually matter so long as we do it with the right stuff that we put into it. We put into it? It's not about style. Anyone who says it's about style hasn't actually taken the time to listen to those who he is debating. There is substance in all that we do. If you think having a lot of black stuff around doesn't have substance, you haven't talked to many goths. And if you think that singing and raising your hands doesn't have something to do with trying to ascend to the glory of God, apart from word and sacrament, you haven't talked to many charismatics. Or you're a closet one. A little bit more strategy for you today. People have a desperate need for mutual support and social structure that comes from joining a common cause. The most successful organizations have an ideology. If you don't subscribe to the ideology, you don't stay and argue or act as a silent dissenter. You walk, or eventually you'll be asked to walk. Lutheranism has a standard ideology. Churches that don't cling to it, they're not going to keep their people. It might be next year, it might be 30 years, but you'll get to the point where you're just like the rest of the mainline liberal Protestantism, which has no ideology. Its ideology is there is no ideology. And what are they doing? They are hemorrhaging at the seams because people want to believe something. And guess what, Lutherans? You have something worth believing. Need to say it again? Yes, I do. Christ is dead and raised for the justification of you and all of us by grace through the forgiveness of sins. Believe that. That's faith. Plan on finding a new Worldview Everlasting podcast in the next day and a half or so via iTunes or at worldvieweverlasting.blogspot.com. And now I need to say something really funny and catchy to make you feel like you really enjoyed this so you come back and watch me again.